Okay, Bernie, please represent the left well on the issue of Ukraine. Your only hope on it, okay? Amen, hallelujah. Let's listen.
Thanks, everybody, for joining me to discuss a very, very serious issue. Yesterday, we witnessed an extremely sad moment in American history. We saw the President of the United States aligning himself with the dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, to undermine the independence of Ukraine and its democracy. Let's be clear. Trump is showing us that he sees one of the world's most brutal dictators as his friend and our longtime democratic allies in Europe as his enemies. He wants a world that is safe for authoritarians and oligarchs, but extremely dangerous for democracies. It will not surprise you when I tell you that Trump is lying, as he so...
You want to know how I know Zelensky's not a dictator? Because Trump has yet to fellatio him. He has yet to call his military invasions genius and fantastic and how strong and beefy he is.
Often does. Yesterday, Trump said that Ukraine started the war. That's not true. Russia invaded Ukraine twice, first in 2014 and then again in 2022. Right now, Russia occupied...
Wait. Russia invaded Ukraine twice within the last decade, okay? Just putting that out there, you know? Ukrainian People's Republic, there's a few other occasions where, you know, Moscow, a center of power, has marched westward. It's not a lot over the last 300, 400 years.
Is about 20% of Ukraine. Since Putin's horrific invasion, over 1 million people have been killed or injured. Every single day, Russia continues to rain down hundreds of missiles and drones on Ukrainian cities. Putin's forces have massacred civilians and kidnapped thousands of Ukrainian children, bringing them back to Russian re-education camps.
How many times has Donald Trump, as a president of the United States, or on the campaign trail, mentioned the kidnapping of Ukrainian children? Does anybody remember him mentioning it once? What about the torture of POWs? What about Bucha? What about the human safari? What about the blowing up of Kherson's dam and the accusations of Russian, the Russians being behind that, and the bombing of the civilians 48 hours afterwards? Anything. The bombing of the hospital in Kiev. The children's cancer ward. Anything? Bernie, in 1 minute and 30 seconds, has shown more outrage than Donald Trump in the entirety of his career about the Russian invasion of Ukraine directed towards the Russians. Want to know what Donald Trump's first reaction to the war was? Let me just throw this out there. Here it is. How can any of us forget this fantastic interview moment that was on, by the way, February 23rd. This is the day of the invasion, before anybody could filter Trump.
Thanks, everyone.
Wrong one. Look at that guy. Looks a lot like Bernie Sanders, doesn't he? Trump's changed a lot in a few years. Here it is. There we go.
I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right.
That was his initial reaction to the invasion. No wonder she doesn't care and talk about it, because he doesn't care.
So atrocities led the International Criminal Court to issue an arrest warrant for Putin in 2023 as a war criminal. Further, Trump called Ukrainian President Zelensky a dictator. That's not true either. Zelensky won 75% of the vote in free elections. In fact, his approval rating is higher than Trump's. In the midst of a brutal war, Ukraine's parliament continues to function and free and unfettered political debate takes place. Trump claimed that our European allies have done little to support Ukraine in its fight against Putin's invasion. He said the United States has contributed 3 times more.
Oh my, okay, I'm sorry. But Bernie has always, for the last decade, Winnie has picked up the mantle of the most popular left-wing politician in the United States, and is now the most popular politician in the United States, period. It has been like that ever since he ran, really, in 2015, 2016. In the fallout of 2020. He's the most popular politician in the United States, which also, by the way, I think is very helpful. Bernie's using this moment. Remember what I said? I made this video. I don't know if we released it. I said the left needs to act on Ukraine now. That Trump is about to make an imperial deal to take Ukraine's resources, sell its people, sell its land, keep them away from the table, and possibly set them up for another war. Sell out the country. I'm not saying that's going to happen or that's 100% the plan, but from the way things are going, it's certainly a possibility. And now is the time to act. And Bernie stood 10 toes down, stepped on a soapbox, and got to work. I appreciate that. Bernie has a big platform. How many people watch this just on YouTube? Not even talking about the reposting on their social media. 3.3 million in one day. 3.3 million solely Ukraine-focused announcement. This is what I would like to see more from the left. And listen to what he's saying. Remember what we talked about earlier? What I talked about earlier is when Trump went up and he lied about the war, and he lies about the amount of aid we give them. He lies about the amount of people who've died. He lies about how the war started. He lies about what happened under his term. Because, oh, there was nothing under my term. Avdiivka was attacked in 2017. Of course, makes it look like peanuts compared to what's going on now, but, you know, he paints a flowery picture when he continued the same Obama-era failed policies when it comes to the war in Ukraine. And when he's out there and he's saying, we've set $10 trillion, it could be any made-up number. He changes it every week. He always increases it. And when the polling numbers go down, the Ukraine aid numbers just tend to double in Trump's announcements. As he's like throwing all this data out there, what's Harris supposed to do? Actually, the Europeans give more than us. You know, we're actually, your statistics are wrong. And if she does that, what is she doing? She's using her time in the spotlight when she has like less than 100 days to introduce herself to the public to stick up for the French. No, she's not going to do that. That's not smart campaigning. So she just let that generally go unanswered. The most you could do is have some of your rapid response team on social media respond to it. But Bernie doesn't have that restraint. And Bernie is just, to him, for to swing at it straight at the base. Like, no, it's just a lie. The Europeans paid more. The Europeans sent more financial assistance. The Europeans have given more aid to Ukraine than the United States. This has been the case for years. For years. It's only was the other way around, I think, for maybe the opening year of the war. Ever since like 2023, late 2023, early 2024, I think maybe even mid 2023. I keep trying to remember when exactly it was overtaken, but it's been years. And so it needs to be admitted that the Europeans have overtaken us in the amount of aid, and this continued lie of the Europeans just not doing anything whatsoever and just not pulling their weight at all is something that's just a political winner. It's not something that's in actuality. It's not real. You could talk about the fact that general increases in military need to be made in certain NATO states, not Poland, but say, you know, 2% in Germany, which they finally hit that standard. That number is probably going to be moved up. These are discussions you can have, but when it comes to contribution to Ukraine, they outpace the United States. No, I don't think the Europeans give enough. But if I don't think the Europeans give enough and they're giving more than the United States, what does that say about the United States? Especially when we give them $110 billion over 3 years and then ask for $500 billion worth of natural resources in compensation for a country that has a GDP of $170 billion. You're just asking to buy the country 3 times over. Not to mention control of the ports and critical infrastructure and exclusive economic deal. He's asking for this huge chunk, and if the Americans can get this chunk, why can't the Europeans? We had this argument before, but Bernie Sanders, seeing this, I think that there is something in that man that is repulsed by the idea of us coming back, fulfilling our agreement for the Budapest Memorandum, and then saying, here's your check, and it's upcharged through the fucking roof for a country that is going to be needing to spend the next decades rebuilding and removing bombs out of the soil that'll be blowing the legs off their children. Children not even born yet. And I think there's just something in this man that gets repulsed by this because he's a human being. He's authentic. That's why people like Bernie. It's why he's the most popular politician in the country. And so while Bernie Sanders is coming out here talking about this, we have the president of the United States calling Zelensky a dictator and blaming the Ukrainians for the war. So this is what I wanted the left to do. This is the most popular left-wing politician in the United States, and I just have to give him more credit than even I would give the usual politician. Because not only is Bernie Sanders right, Bernie Sanders is hitting on basically every issue that he needs to hit on when it comes to the amount of aid we're giving the Europeans, exactly how that the war didn't just start in 2022, that this is a pattern of Russian behavior. He's doing good. And we're not even halfway through. I'm sorry, I'm gushing a little bit, but this is what I wanted.
In Europe. But that's another lie. In fact, Europe has provided more aid to Ukraine than the United States. But it's not just that Trump is lying again. That's not new. It's what this all reveals about where he wants to take our country, and in fact, the entire world. Trump is cozying up to Vladimir Putin. So who is Putin? And what kind of world does he want to build?
Bernie, people talked about you as, oh, you honeymooned in the Soviet Union, talked about all those people need to jump into traffic lanes, okay? And then cross the street peacefully, because this is a normal stream. We would not wish harm upon anyone, but they should really be disappointed in themselves because, man, Bernie Sanders, the Soviet honeymooner, currently has a stronger position against the Russians than the President of the United States, a Republican. Socialist Bernie Sanders is stronger against the Russians and their empire building than the current Republican president. That's baffling. On the other side, this right here, talking about the world Putin wants to build, why don't I hear this more from the left? Okay, the unipolar world order breaks apart. Multipolar world order. What exactly does Putin's Europe looks like? What's Putin's Ukraine looks like? What's Putin's Georgia looks like? We know what Putin's Chechnya looks like, with the gays put in camps and tortured, with Kadyrov's son using the public like playthings, taking people who criticize him off the street and having his son literally just beat him on camera, post that on social media to show, hey, look, my kids are beating up my critics in the school. That we see how that works there. We see that the Russians are openly like pointing towards empire. And I understand like internal critique is most important for the country you live in. But if you're one of the countries that are at the table that is filling power vacuums, that is a necessity for the countries that are holding up against those expansionist powers. If you have made deals based on nuclear non-proliferation, which is a goal that Bernie cares about, a goal that the left has widely cared about, you want to uphold those deals. You don't want the message from this to be, you give up your nukes, you fucking die. Don't give up your nukes. In fact, everyone get nukes. If you get nukes, you can actually solve your little territorial and ethnic disputes, because then nobody can do anything, because you'll just threaten to blow up the world. He doesn't like that idea of a world. He doesn't like that idea of, I think, occupation falling upon European states anymore. Because Bernie Sanders bases left-wing values, and I think probably some amount of appreciation for democracy, some amount of appreciation for civil liberty, and some amount of, I think his socialism was born through, or his views of like socialism was born through the idea of helping your neighbor, and like the poor should not be poor. And I don't think in that message it was like, oh, also everyone needs to speak Russian. This is really easy. This is really simple. But Russophilia has dug itself into parts of the left, and the Russians have worked really hard to get themselves deeper and deeper into both far right and far left circles. That's why you had Nick Fuentes gushing about them. At the same time that you're going to have someone like Caleb Maupin gushing about them. At the same time that you're going to have people on either fringes, because they want to try to just find anyone that advocates against the United States having a prominent role in foreign policy in opposition to Russia. And they'll find anyone and they'll boost them, whether they're right wing, whether they're left wing, whether they're a fascist, whether they're a like hardcore, like, I don't know, hoaxist, whatever. And so I think that might be part of the problem. I think after the Iraq and Afghanistan war, any even semblance of the appearance of militarism is fearful. Of course, we live in an age after the Cold War, Fear of atomic fire, of course, is a very real threat, something we should be mindful of. But it's so easy to just say, that's empire. They want to build empire. They want to make it easy to build empire and want to crush the countries we made deals with about like getting rid of atomic weapons. The viewpoint is so easy here to cut through. But I don't know. It's just nice to see Bernie in like 5 minutes just cut through the fog, cut through the haze, clearly with no like if, ands, or buts. And like, well, you know, during World War II, the Russian people, well, so were the Ukrainians. Fuck that. Okay? Stop referencing what the Russians did in World War II. Stop living in the past. The Ukrainians also died in World War II. And those are the people the Russians are invading right now. We live in the right now. I appreciate it so much. Just the simple cut through.
Putin is a dictator who crushed Russia's movement toward democracy after the end of the Cold War. Russia holds sham elections every 6 years where Putin wins 90% of the vote, and authorities don't even try to hide their ballot stuffing. There is no freedom of speech or free media in Putin's Russia. Protests are violently suppressed. Tens of thousands of people are in prison for protesting Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Political dissidents are harassed or thrown into jail. The bravest, people like Alexei Navalny, are killed outright. Hundreds of thousands of Russians have fled Putin's brutal regime since his invasion of Ukraine. But Putin has maintained control in his country by offering Russia's oligarchs a simple deal. If you give me absolute power, I'll let you steal as much as you want from the Russian people. And that's why in a country where many are struggling economically, Russian oligarchs have stashed trillions of dollars in offshore tax accounts. That is the Russian leader that Trump admires. That is the Russian oligarchy that he supports. But that is not the perspective of the American people. We know, and we are proud of, the fact that the United States of America is the longest standing democracy in the world. We know that many hundreds of thousands of brave Americans over the years have fought and died to defend democracy. We also know that our allies in the world are those countries that believe in democracy, not authoritarianism. In this critical moment in our history, I hope that every American, regardless of political perspective, will stand tall and say yes to democracy, no to oligarchy, and no to authoritarianism. Thank you very much.
Simple, direct, went through it quickly, didn't need to get too much into the weeds, and used as a platform in a moment we didn't need to, but he chose to, as the largest and most popular, not only left-wing politician in the country, but the most popular politician in the country, period, as polled year after year. It's good for him to use this platform. Let's hope others in the space do as well, others in the movement do, because if you're against occupation of peoples, this is an example of it.
I asked if you liked birch trees. You said you didn't know what I meant by that. Can us birch tree enjoyers count on your support?
Yeah, no comment. This is a political question. I don't think we need to politicize this.